This is I, Tentis Naravan Dracovin, Lord and Emperor of the Dracovin Empire, and welcome. It is time to continue my discussion on anime series, where I review them for you, and then let you know how you can use them in your Big Eyes Small Mouth game, your BESM games. Of course, you can really use these in any role-playing game system if you wish to adapt them, but these suggestions hold true for BESM. So let's dive into the first one I want to talk about today, because I've got two more from summer 2014, and then two past inspirations I felt were interesting to talk about. So let's start with Rail Wars. So Rail Wars focuses on this world, this alternate Japan, where the national railway system was never privatized. We focus on Naoto, who hopes to become an important member of the Japanese National Railway. He ends up, though, on their security forces as a trainee. So now he has to deal with not only his new job as a member of the security force and learning how to do that, he has to deal with eccentric co-workers that are there, but also he has to deal with this organization that's fighting to privatize the railway system and basically committing terrorist-type acts in order to do that. So we can see that his life is not as easy as he wants it to be. So this is an action series. We have big things where they're doing basically police work and getting into fights along that way. It's to a loose degree of harem. He has a couple of co-workers that both like him and kind of develops relationships with these two female co-workers that are a part of it, along with some other women that are in his life, but those two are the main ones we kind of focus on here. And it's the fact that he develops these relationships, even though they're very kind of loose and there. But it's also a police, because guess what? They're pretty much police officers, even though they're policing trains. Now, I rate this one a 3. The action and police work are very interesting, and these side genres, which there are a couple smaller ones after this, but they make it a little bit more interesting than your just average sort of police thing, and the fact that they're on trains. Now, if you're using this in a BESM game, I would recommend 200 points. You're going to make a group of characters, well, trainees on the national railway system in the security forces. Simple as that. They're going to go through training exercises. They will spend time actually patrolling trains, maybe dealing with minor crimes and criminals. You can possibly bring in organizations like those that are trying to privatize it that can cause kind of more large-scale incidents that your characters will have to deal with. It's up to you the depths of the incidents that they will get into, but it's all going to revolve around the railway system and then being the effective law enforcement of the railway system. And of course, as I said, they're going to be training, they're going to be deepening their bonds, they're probably going to spend some time in the office kind of thing, maybe working with other individuals that are part of this entire security force, and learning some cooperation, teamwork along the way. Each of these characters bringing in their own little bits of eccentricity and reasons for being here in the first place. Whether they're great reasons or terrible reasons, they will have them. So let's move on to the second one from 2014 I did want to talk about today. Yama no Susume, or Encouragement of Climbing. So Aoi, she prefers indoor activities. She hates heights. But she gets reunited with a childhood friend, Hina. Now, in the old days, her and Hina basically had gone up a mountain with Hina's family, and had seen this beautiful sunrise. Hina wants to recreate that with an old promise with Aoi, so ends up basically bringing her along on climbing adventures. The mountain that they had climbed up as children is something far beyond their abilities to not go on their own with. So they start small, basically bringing up Aoi and moving her up into new mountains of climbing, exploring, meeting new people, learning to, camp there, to cook there, to have enjoyable times, and having her, though she doesn't really prefer the outdoors and kind of has that fear of heights, to begin to understand and enjoy the idealism of climbing and finding out what you get when you get there, what you see and what you can enjoy. And this adventure together and the new friends they meet along the way is what the essence of this show is. Starting small mountains, getting larger ones. So this, in a way, is, of course, a slice of life. Not only do we see them when they're mountain climbing, we see them in a little bit of their normal lives, in prepping for it, dealing with what's going on in their basic lives, and getting everything together. So we do see this slice of them going from their sort of planning, talking about it, getting things done, and mixing a little bit of their normal lives that they have to balance this with up until the climbing. It's a little bit of an adventure because guess what? These mountain climbs are the adventures they're going on. Going to different and more interesting mountains that are maybe easier or slightly get more difficult, that have more challenges to them that they have to seek out. It's also comedy, because there's plenty of little funny moments that happen in their interactions, or the eccentricities of some of the characters that they meet that make it more interesting and fun. I rate this one a 5. This one's technically an ongoing series, because they will have another season out soon, and they have OVAs coming out, but it's a little funny one that makes you feel like maybe climbing a mountain sometime. And it makes you feel like it's just good feelings overall. So that's why I can recommend it. And it makes you interested in maybe checking out the outdoors too. So, hey, if you're using this in a BESM game, keep it simple. 150 points. Your characters are going to be a group of people that like climbing mountains. And the entire point of it is you'll have to balance out a little bit of normal life while prepping for a mountain-based adventure, getting the materials together, maybe dealing with buying new gear or equipment, finding out where you can get it best, planning out important things, and then going on these mountain climbing adventures, whether it's just a simple hike up a trail to the top of a mountain, or something that involves actual climbing, will be completely up to your characters and the skills that they will develop along the way. It will be the adventure of traveling to these places and going and exploring them, which you could use real-world mountains, real-world trails if you really wanted to. It's completely up to you as the GM what you want to develop as options for your characters. Maybe give them a couple of them, and then they can choose and use appropriately which mountain they want to go and explore as a team together. Now, my inspiration this week were, of course, technically 2 manga. But technically, one is a manga, one is more of a video game. But let's go over the manga one that I wanted to talk about. Kyochuu Rettou. So we find this class of students, and they are in a plane ride, and it crashes. We have our main girl, Mitsuki, survives the plane crash, and with a number of other survivors begins to try to ink out a living here. She has a number of survival skills which can help him out, and knowledge of nature that's assisting them in surviving on this island which appears to be abandoned. There are no sign of people there. Signs that people were there. But then they discover the island is inhabited by giant insects. So now it becomes a fight for survival, and Mitsuki's knowledge of insects coming greatly in handy to try to keep as many of her classmates and fellow passengers alive as these things are tearing them apart, hunting them down, using their natural instincts. If you're talking about the genres for this one, first and foremost, horror. Giant insects tearing people apart, death and destruction happening very often, in very horrible manners. It's also a survival. They have to deal with the fact that they're trying to survive, making survival attempts. It's also, to a degree, a school. We see set with some of the students flashbacks to the past and school, hinting on the relationships that they had before they came to this island, and the type of people that they are. Whether or not they survive once we've learned about them is another thing entirely. Now, I rate this one a 4. When it comes to these kind of horror survival type ones, I'm a mixed bag on this one, but this one did manage to draw me in without having the characters die so much that it drove me away, because that can happen in basically anime and manga like these. Fortunately, it did not in this one. Now, if you're using this as a BESM game, I'd recommend 175 points. You're going to make your characters a group, whether students or something else, that gets either shipwrecked or plane crashed on a mysterious island. One that you will, of course, have signs of human life that have been abandoned. And it's also filled with giant insects. So now it's a fight for survival, surviving upon this island, surviving the giant insects. And it will be up to your core group to try to survive. This is another one where death might be an option even for your PCs. NPCs will definitely be dying along the way, and you should establish that there is an entire group upon the island that If you need to refresh the group somehow with new people that they will discover that have managed to survive up until now, you very easily can. You also might have to work with infighting within the group. Those that have their own ways, opinions, feels like they should be in charge, things like that that will cause dissent and cause problems with both the survival and avoiding death by the giant insects. The final one I want to talk about today is Dragon's Crown. Now, this has both been a manga and a video game. I was inspired by the manga, but the video game is very good too because I've also played that. So Dragon's Crown is set in this kingdom of Highland, where the entire plot revolves around this quest that seems to exist throughout the kingdom to seek out this legendary artifact, the Dragon's Crown. This group of mages has basically created a portal system connecting civilization to these lost ruins, labyrinths, places filled with horrible monsters and the darkest depths of Highland. And now it's up to groups of adventurers to dive forth into these various locations, to explore them, to seek information on the Dragon's Crown, while these group of wizards basically manipulate both them and the government and those around them within the kingdom to their ends. So there is this level of manipulation in it, even though the quest itself is for the glory of Highland. Now it's in action. There's great battle scenes, fighting mythical creatures and monsters. It's adventure, traveling to strange ruins, labyrinths, dungeons, places of mystery and magic. And in that way, it's also fantasy. There's magic users, those that channel divine energies, people that battle out for the very glory of adventuring. Now I rate this one a 4. I rate it a little I really enjoyed it a lot. It's interesting. I love the video game. The manga was pretty good too, from what I've read of it. So both of these make me feel like, hey, it's a great series to adapt. Now, if you're going to use this in BESM game, I'd recommend 300 points. Important note at the beginning of this one, this is one of the easiest ones to adapt to some other systems. You could easily adapt this setting to something like Dungeons & Dragons or Pathfinder because they're also very fantasy settings. Adapting the exact way that characters work in this system to one of those systems is more of a challenge. That one you would have to maybe use something like this if you were going to use a lot more of the actual video game systems. Up to you how much you want to use this, but this is a very adaptable one. Now you're going to make your characters a group of adventurers. Simple as that. They're going to be diving into these ruins, exploring these locations, finding out information, battling hordes of monsters to perhaps hunt down some kind of horrible creature stalking a land in an area, to defeat it and drive it out. To protect what's going on in Highland, to protect the actual civilization itself. And there's plenty of mysterious places and horrible creatures to defeat along the way in order to a degree, purify a land. You could also once again return to these places and explore again with strange new alternate ways opened when you learn of secrets or of places that you can go. Maybe rock walls that can be broken down that you didn't have the techniques to when you first adventured there. And now you have the magic or the strength to break it down. So along the way, you will perhaps revisit some of these places to find new places, new enemies, dive deeper into them on repeated adventures, where once you return, some of those that once lived there have returned to fight against you again. They've fought back to reclaim what you purified of. Along the way, you will have a quest for some kind of powerful artifact. Whether the Dragon's Crown or something else, you might have to deal with the government and what's going on within Highland, with the royalty and things on that end. Deal with the Council of Wizards, which have basically set up these portal systems, or other things going on in town that could both give you side quests and some main plot which unites all of these, if your game master decides to add in a main plot. But that's it for today. So I introduced you to 4 more series. 2 anime series from summer 2014, and then technically 2 series inspired by manga, one that's only manga, one that's also a video game. Now, all of these, Dragon's Crown in particular, can easily be adapted to other role-playing game systems. And it can be just the settings, the storylines, or you could try to adapt some of the mechanics, and then it's up to you to develop that material for character creation and the very mechanics of these game systems. Some of them that you're just normal people in situations. A lot of those that I talked about today are actually really adaptable. The majority of these that I talked about are very adaptable. That's what today's episode is. Very adaptable game systems. I could put these worlds into countless game systems without much trouble whatsoever. Because 3 of these, you're normal people. 1 of these, standard fantasy kind of ideals. See here? We've already made it that this has opened this up to being something that you could easily adapt to game systems. This one in particular. So if you want to try to adapt any of these to something else other than BESM, I'd maybe recommend trying to check these out first. Just saying. But if you have any questions, comments, anything you want to say, anything you think I left out, please just leave in the comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe. That's your support of the channel, the empire, the work I do. If you want to show some extra support, you can always check out my Patreon. Link description below. There are some great rewards there. It helps to grow and improve the channel and the empire. But regardless, until the next time, I bid you farewell.